Sure, we all know the history of the founding of the United States. So first, Columbus discovered it, which was super fortunate for the people living here. Then, like 100 years later, we founded Roanoke, and it disappeared. 22 years after that, Jamestown was founded. John Rolfe married Pocahontas, because he was a friend of the natives or something. 14 years after that, the Pilgrims landed Plymouth Rock, and thus a refuge for religious exiles with a classist structure where anyone can be anything was born. Fast forward another century, Pennsylvania and Virginia are now thriving colonies. Carolina is a single colony with free labor in the north and slavery in the south, which eventually divides it. Georgia is created as a buffer zone between the Spanish and the English. We're in an unfortunate mess where slavery exists out of necessity, not desire, in all 13 colonies. Then King George gets mean about taxes and causes the revolution. Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson, intellectual free-thinking giants of political reform and the Enlightenment, give birth to the Declaration of Independence and all our other founding documents in some sort of strange birthing ritual involving a young slave and a private hotel room. Later, Thomas Jefferson becomes president and sends representatives to France to buy New Orleans, which literally controlled trade on the new Western Front. Instead, he buys all of Louisiana Territory for more than he was authorized to spend, making him the president who doubled the size of the U.S. and set the precedent on ignoring the founding documents he wrote. Finally, along comes Andrew Jackson, the magnanimous supporter and defender of the common man. He cleared the land of the intrusive natives that had been here longer than we have, and makes way for the rough and tumble backwoods frontierman who clears the land and prepares it for future generations of settlers. Then I read part 1 of Nancy Eisenberg's White Trash, the 400-year untold story of class in America, and realized this entire story is a tale, a yarn, a lie, propagated by the powerful to maintain power over the poor. So let's rewind to 1492 and acquire some land without the rose-colored history goggles. Roll the intro.
Well, I'm not a crook.
Our long national nightmare is over.
Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
Either you are with us or you are with the terrorists.
Rate unjust taxes upon the commonality for the advancement of private favorites. So it's 1492, the crew is about to mutiny, and someone yells, "Land ho!" Columbus is in the Bahamas. He thought he was in India, hence the pejorative Indians for the indigenous peoples. But that's because Columbus was an idiot, which is why it's Indigenous Peoples Day now. Before we can build a nation there, we'll have to colonize it. In the 1500s, Richard Hakluyt's New World Tales put entertainment over truth. Hakluyt the Younger was the Oxford-trained author of the well-read Principal Navigations. His natives simply needed Christ's saving grace to become subservient trading partners. Hakluyt saw the New World as empty, legally available for the taking, which Elizabeth and James I did. Savages could not own land under English legal fiction. Colonization starts. Rip the land and the natives. Colonization breeds two classes, owners and occupiers.
Whether barren or empty, uncultivated or rank, the land acquired a quintessentially English meaning. The English were obsessed with waste, which was why America was first and foremost a wasteland in their eyes. Wasteland meant undeveloped land, land that was outside the circulation of commercial exchange and apart from the understood rules of agricultural production.
John Smith calling Virginia wasteland was saying it needed exploiting. Hakluyt called the continent waste firm. Waste people, work, waste firm. England was inundated with impoverished people, and according to the contemporary Volkgeist, poor people earned destitution in pauper's prison with sloth. Deportation would remove them. Send debtors, receive goods. Use the destitute and new land to enrich the crown.
God save the Queen!
To Hakluyt, the lazy poor were a social pariah to be exploited in the New World. Slum-ridden 17th century London used Virginia to expel human waste from the body politic. The public nuisance broke laws against their existence. In 1619, James I implores the Virginia Company to deport the vagabonds. Tropes show veterans turned thieves and lawless vagabond gangs. Deportation solved crime. Deport vagabond families, teach them to value hard work, make sailors and soldiers. Just turn the poor into cannon fodder. Next up, Jamestown. Blasphemy, a capital offense. Public defecation, legal. One dude cannibalized his wife. 1,400 of 6,000 settlers stopped breathing in 16 years. It was a labor camp enslaving settlers. Entrenched settlers were sluggish, idle, and bestial, playing cards, recruiting natives, and trading with sailors. Untamed land creates food shortages. Meanwhile, a glassblower made beads for the natives. Rolfe married Pocahontas and introduced tobacco. Landowners got rich and laborers got sold. In 1616, freeman land rations were halved. Virginia's indentured children remained so until 24, and the indentured were chattel. Most Virginia indentured were boys. Dead indentures' kin had to pay their debts. Jane Dixon was enslaved by natives, then returned and enslaved to pay her dead husband's debts. To correct the problems, the Virginia Company sold marriageable women for 150 pounds of tobacco. They were commoditized breeding stock, shipped with chattel, and married. Jamestown had one product and a disposable workforce. It was the powerful and the enslaved. So what about the Bay Colony?
Plymouth Beauty is not a fad.
The Mayflower arrived in Cape Cod, sans William Bradford's wife. Half the colonists died within a year. John Winthrop brought 700 religious dissenters and commercialists a decade later. The Christian refuge from education and papacy sold land cheap. Like Hakluyt, Winthrop called the poor scum of the land. His God's design was gentlemen aristocrats, clergy, and educated misters, masters, or mistresses, goodmen landholders, than everyone else. Everyone else being apprentices, servants, debtors, criminals, captured natives, indentured, and African slaves. Apprentice, servant, and child were legal synonyms. The family worked with servants, and this distinguished the Bay Colony from Virginia and blurred the progeny versus property line. Living on family land subjected one to the patriarch. Families included children of deceased spouses, unrelated servants, and slaves. The Puritan family was not a modern family by any stretch.
Burn the witch.
Cotton Mather wrote a book dictating servant behavior. Every Puritan knew your wealth by your pew. Church members held legal sway. Excommunicants were disenfranchised. Mary Dyer refused to leave or repent, so they hung her. And Hutchinson was expelled for holding private Bible studies. All of this because theocracy hadn't changed since Dark Ages Europe. Town patriarchs and family ensured future prosperity through arranged marriages. To English explorers, a land patent or deed was a marriage contract. America was the lady in waiting, and taming her lands a reproductive act.
The richest embellishment of New World fertility came from the pen of Thomas Morton, whose New English Canaan, or New Canaan, containing an abstract of New England, 1637, offered humorous double entendre amid lush descriptions of the land. Historians are divided over what to make of the controversial Morton. Some reckon him a scoundrel and libertine, while others regard him as a populist critic of Governor John Winthrop and the Puritan establishment.
Nathaniel Bacon, a planter of means, showed up in 1674 and was relegated to the Virginia frontier by Governor William Berkeley. Bacon was like, "My taxes pay for the military, send them to take care of the natives." And Berkeley was like, "No." Then Bacon united the poor across profession, race, and freedom status. This force was large enough to threaten the Virginia aristocracy if Bacon had attacked them instead of the natives. Settlers who saw frontier people as human waste didn't care. Bacon's landholders were evicted from the special privileges room of the Landholders Club. Indentured and enslaved were promised freedom. Modern people picture colonial Virginia as a slave-saturated antebellum hell. At this time, it was not slave-saturated. In 1670, 1 in 26 Virginians was enslaved, which is 1 in 26 too many, but not slave-saturated. Bacon's grievances were real. Natives were dangerous and the government wasn't protecting settlers. Landlopers were stealing the best land. Falling tobacco prices caused a local recession. Old problems that still exist today. Vulnerability increases proportional to distance from power centers. Bacon misdirected his anger away from the aristocracy that was literally stealing from the poor and toward the natives. In this way, he turned the marginalized on the more marginalized. Remember that pattern.
I'll be back.
Bacon used women however it benefited him. Elizabeth Bacon, his wife, and a member of a prominent family stumped for the rebellion. Taxes would end the sewing circle or some shit like that. To protect his men, he kidnapped Berkeley's supporters, wives, and used them as a human shield. The words bad guy seemed to fit this situation. Then Bacon got dysentery and shit himself to death less than a year into the rebellion. The aristocracy learned that giving marginalized people a more marginalized people to look down on them busies them punching down, making the race bribe political capital. Women were valuable, so Bacon's wife and daughters were allowed to live on his estate. Berkeley started telling King Jimmy he was wrong to pardon the rebels, so King Jimmy was like, "Hey, Berkeley, get the f*** over here." Berkeley went to London for an inquest and died 5 months later. In 1662, Virginia became the first English colony to enslave slaves' children. Children were an asset on labor-intensive farms. Reproductively gifted women were prized. Fertile slave woman was a golden goose. At this point, we've developed the land we will build the U.S. on. We have yet to really establish robust colonies. However, we already have a fully fledged class system made up of lords and the enslaved. But wait, there's more. To protect the aristocracy, we've birthed a third class wedged between the enslaved and the landed. The white trash. We busied them with a race bribe, misdirecting their anger toward the enslaved and natives as the source of their destitution, leaving the powerful completely blameless in the Folkgeist. Let's take a look at how 3 other southern colonies were established. Every free man of Carolina shall have absolute power and authority over his Negro slaves. We need more rooms in this house. 1 room simply will not do. Let's develop more land and then put a 2nd room on it. We'll worry about connecting the 2 later because nothing could possibly go wrong with that plan. Early 18th century academics read John Locke. He was proto-foundational to the U.S. He was a founder of and third largest stakeholder in the Royal African Company. In 1663, King Chuck Deuce was like, "Hey, you 8 dudes want to be absolute lords and proprietors of Carolina?" The Duke of Albemarle had Albemarle County surveyed. Anthony Ashley Cooper, Lord of Shaftesbury, brought politics. Heading the Council of Trade and owning foreign plantations did not bother Shaftesbury, who made Locke official instructor of Carolina agents. Locke owned 48,000 American acres that he never saw. Armed with fantastical reports and royal opinions, Locke formulated the oppressive fundamental constitutions to govern Carolina. These constitutions endorsed slavery and favored the titled. Land was split with 20% for proprietors, 20% for nobility, and 60% for untitled lords and freeholders. The proprietors decided law by fiat with a puppet parliament. Landgrave and cacique were hereditary titles, and the court of heraldry arranged aristocratic marriages. This did not work.
Yes, I remember you, Carolina, grand old lady of the South.
Locke's constitutions created leatmen between slaves and freemen. They were tied to the land, leasable but not saleable. Locke's solution to rural poverty: provide poor relief and enslave them, a peasant class. Shaftesbury instructed governors to purchase slaves, indentures, and leatmen. They purchased slaves and indentured, which will be important later. Locke's constitutions declared war on the poor. Virginia's governor sold land outside his borders. Carolina made these landholders squatters. The wealthy were imported to avoid intolerable classlessness. After turning landholders into squatters, Locke called them lubbers, putting them below serfs, which is why I'm playing surf music right now. Let's create North and South Carolina and Georgia. The North was formerly indentured squatters, the middle a slave-based economy, the South a sparsely populated buffer between English and Spanish colonies. By 1740, 7 in 10 South Carolinians were enslaved. New laws required more white laborers. Leatmen would have prevented this. North Carolina swamps hid rebellious landless or lubbers. North Carolina, the white trash colony, a degenerate breeding ground. Georgia, the free state, split off in 1732. No rum and no slaves, just indentured and bonded men. But first, let's take a closer look at North Carolina. What we call Washington, D.C. today was a 2,200 square mile swamp of waist-deep slime and knee-deep peat engulfing the Virginia-North Carolina border. Large swamps talk, and it's creepy.
This statement comes from the travelogue of a wealthy Virginian, William Byrd II, who trekked through the bowels of the Virginia-Carolina borderland in 1728. A witty, English-educated planter, Byrd crafted a dark tale of an inhospitable landscape and weighed in on Carolina's oafish inhabitants.
This border separated civilized Virginia and white trash North Carolina. Washington wanted to drain the swamp, at least until the Revolution. North Carolina was commercially isolated. Virginia charged heavy tariffs, so North Carolinians smuggled. Blackbeard loved the defensible inlets. He even called the colony home. An Anglican minister said Albemarle County was overrun with sloth and poverty, a British possession in name only. 2 rebellions and a native war later, it's John Culpeper. Dude, pay your f***ing rent. I can't hear you. Miller hijacked the government. Culpeper rallied the populace. Anyone going to London? Miller filed charges against Culpeper, who was sentenced to death in 1680. Then Shaftesbury was like, North Carolina has no government. Miller admits that. So what exactly is Culpeper guilty of rebelling against? No government, no rebellion, no death sentence. In a revolutionary dress rehearsal, Culpeper rallied men with cries of no landgraves, no caciques. Farmers who could not survive and pay duties joined Culpeper. Miller's drunken tirades about illegally seizing power led to sedition and blasphemy charges. North Carolina burned through governors like Trump threw wives. South Carolina appointed Edward Hyde North Carolina governor. North Carolina rebelled. Virginia Governor Spotswood attacked North Carolina. Captain John Barnwell shows up to put down the natives. Locals fuck with him. He incites the natives. Governor Spotswood's Albemarle County is a common sanctuary for our runaways. Byrd, proving Columbus is not the only historical idiot since 1710. Rode the Virginia and North Carolina border like a holy savior sprinkling holy water on savage squatters. Locals, who bought this land from Spotswood in the first place, did not appreciate this. His published survey called North Carolina Lubberland.
Lawrence Lazy, born in the county of Sloth near the town of Neverwork. Lawrence was a heavy lump who sat in his chimney corner and dreamt. His dog was so lazy that he lied his head agin the wall to bark. In Lubberland, sloth was contagious, and Lawrence had the power to put all masters under his spell so that they fell into a deep slumber. As applied to the rural poor who closed themselves off to the world around them, the metaphor of sleep suggested popular resistance to colonial rule.
Byrd said swamp air caused distempers of laziness, and undercooked pork caused the yaws, or syphilis. He suggested importing Swiss Germans to drain the swamp and marry indigenous women, making natives whiter, an early example of the white savior complex. Colonial poor were bad people from bad soil, lazier and sicker than English counterparts. Now,
The devil went down to Georgia. He was looking for a soul to steal.
Georgia's charter created a charitable venture. Landholders limited to 500 acres. No landhoarding. European settlers were given 50 acres, a house, and a garden. This free labor economy outlawed hard drink and dark skin, because free labor would fix idleness. Well, it was charitable in theory. Oglethorpe and 114 colonists landed in 1733. An old military man, Oglethorpe set the example for colonists to follow. Military drills began on board the ship. He impressed male orphans old enough to hold a musket. Indenture was allowed, but shunned as timed slavery. Oglethorpe believed a fair chance was all the disadvantage needed. Georgia's charter did not ban slavery. Oglethorpe did, because enslaved freemen profit no one. To Oglethorpe, impressment was slavery. The opposition said sailors and Africans were born for their lots. White indentures can easily run away. They accused Oglethorpe of running a white slave colony. Scottish and German settlers sided with Oglethorpe. Trades abounded. Farmers starved for workers. Pro-slavery, Patrick Tailfer refused to till without slaves. To be fair, Oglethorpe was racist and allowed native slaves. He thought slavery was bad for poor whites. Oglethorpe's classless system was fiction. Charity cases were given 50 acres, but buying passage could yield 10 times that and employ 4 to 10 servants. The rules avoid land speculation, and they do employ poor whites. Tail male or oldest male inheritance ensures land ties. Meanwhile, about Carolina, John Locke was like, "Every freeman of Carolina shall have absolute power and authority over his Negro slaves." Oglethorpe spoke of jihad. I mean holy war. Protestant English overtake the Catholic French and Spanish. Oglethorpe lost. South Carolina traders bribed people with slave credits.
Keep on knocking, but you can't come in.
By 1751, Georgia legalized slavery and lifted land limitations. South Carolina and West Indian planters created a planter elite. Only 5% of Georgians owned a single slave, but a South Carolinian owned 250 of them. Okay, so we've discovered and developed land, split it into 13 colonies. English colonies are currently surrounded by Spanish and French, and it's a rather unlivable structure. There's rooms, but there's no roof. It's like where the colonies are right now. creating their own culture, their own classes, and their own isms, racism, sexism, and classism. The inherent reason why free labor and land-grabbing aristocracy cannot coexist. Free people do not stay where they are put, but slaves legally have to. Speaking of sexism, let's talk about Ben Franklin. I think the best way of doing good to the poor is not making them easy in poverty, but leading or driving them out of it. Architects, subcontractors, and interior decorators only get a house so far. Eventually, people move in. They will take it from being a house to being a house. They find the problems with it. Like maybe it's missing a bedroom and a roof. What do an elderly Boston widow, an African slave, and poor Richard Saunders all have in common? They are all Ben Franklin. A mismatched proverb for every complaint. The propaganda sold. Well, Franklin entered full-time politics after retirement in 1748. He tried to unite the colonies in 1751, but it failed colonial ratification. Franklin applied science to social classes. Common sense dictates society's purpose as protection. Corrupt leadership leads to decadence and downfall, like Rome. A pleasure-pain balance creates a sustainable society, in the chasm between debauchery and tyranny. The balance is the largest portion of society between the wealthy and the poor, or the happy mediocrity. To Franklin, people are like pigeons and ants. Pigeons fill their space, adults move out, making room for young, increase the space, and increase your flock. Ants live and work communally. Franklin's uneasy unrest, simply an update to Hacklett's stirs abroad, but Franklin had science and evidence.
She blinded me with science!
In observations concerning the increase of mankind, Franklin predicted incredible population growth and farms breeding out idleness. Franklin figured women could fix everything by popping out kids like turds. He suggested paying women land and the privilege of marrying young to reproduce. In Franklin's The Speech of Miss Polly Baker, standing before a judge, she states,
I have brought 5 fine children into the world at the risk of my life. I have maintained them well by my own industry without burdening the township. Her self-confidence was bolstered by the knowledge of her patriotic service. She had added to the number of the king's subjects in a new country that really wants people. She should be praised, not punished, was the message.
Reproduction is a higher calling than marriage, and so unwed mothers are natural. Then the judge marries Polly. Reproduction is an imperial asset increasing subjects. Franklin also slapped at bachelors, hermaphrodites, wasting their seed in reproductive idleness. As for bastard children, Franklin's 2 bastard great-grandchildren were born to his bastard grandchild, who was born to his bastard son. British North America produced fit and fertile children. Franklin's slavery encouraged poor white theft and sloth. We could create a free labor colony by breeding until our sexual organs fell off or out. The children do the work until they breed more. With all these children, who needs indentures and slaves? They speak French in Montreal because they were a French colony. And Franklin was like, if Britain does not annex Canada, Britain kills her own children, or something like that. Or the slow kids in the back. Franklin is inventing American exceptionalism. Classes stabilize, creating extra people. New land requires westward expansion. People reach a stable level. And a natural mediocrity of fortunes emerges, producing and consuming. Army men secure the land, ant people move in and tame the land, pigeon people fill it up, and then we wash, rinse, and repeat until the glorious and superior European man rules the land. This was all Franklin's idea. The 1700s increased poverty. A 1784 Philly wood shortage almost killed the poor, and infant mortality was exorbitant. Enter Franklin, a self-made man, from runaway apprentice to international celebrity, all on his own! Except, like Hamilton, this is a myth. Pennsylvania class system was the proprietors, the Penns, wealthy Quakers, and then everyone else. Franklin intentionally befriended influential Quakers, resulting in patronage. An unrelated Alexander Hamilton ran the Quaker Party and got Franklin into politics. Franklin's Quaker contacts secure the valuable money printing contract. In 1700s Philly, class status required the right name and or belongings. Franklin wasn't Penn, Pemberton, or Logan, so he bought stuff. In his 1746 portrait, Franklin puts on airs of a proprietor because Franklin was one of the better sort. Let me explain. Commercial goods were sold as better and meaner sorts. The more valuable were better sorts. Meaner sorts were cheap disposables. To Franklin, apprentices, convicts, indentures, and slaves are the meaner sort. They are unfree laborers, dependents, mean, servile, and ill-bred. 7 years earlier, in 1723, Franklin was a runaway. Now, he's complaining about vagrants and idle persons flooding Philly. Referring to people as sorts implies that those people are trade goods. The stupid, unmannered, and rude meaner sort allows others to look down on them. Franklin preferred industrious German settlers who benefited from an uncharitable government. Talk about that in the 5 C's of Identity. I'll link to it on the end screen. Back to Franklin, who in 1766 called Britain Lubberland. I think the best way of doing good to the poor is not making them easy in poverty, but leading them or driving them out of it. When the meaner sort doesn't move out, you make them go. Franklin saw a middling sort. Delaware was invaded, and Franklin feared this fate for Philly. He called for a militia of freemen. Militia membership was a class bribe, something middling sort men could do. Franklin defined the meaner sort as Negroes, mulattoes, and others of the vilest and most abandoned of mankind. The powerful's behavior was human nature. Bigger fish eat smaller fish. It is the natural order of things. It makes the middling class necessary. Franklin decried unrestrained social mobility. Classes flattened by the poor's perpetual westward movement. In 1741, Franklin stated that those below aristocrats infighting secured the aristocrats. If everyone is punching down, the top is protected. To prevent this, spread people out so much they forget there are people above and below them. There are 2 sorts of people, those who live comfortable in good homes and those who are poor and dirty and ragged and vicious and live in miserable cabins. Franklin's frontier was a better sort factory. You put in the meaner sort and the better sort comes out. Discussing Franklin requires that we discuss Thomas Paine. In 1776, Paine published Common Sense, Economic Arguments for Independence, American Exceptionalism, Monarchy Encouraged Incest. The previously exiled from England, Paine stated, a letter of introduction from Franklin provided an editorship, and the former exciseman leads a tax revolution.
And isn't it ironic?
His direct style reached the common man, and Common Sense reached New England, Baltimore, and George Washington. Paine's Euro-American was bred for free trade. Royalty is a social liability, incurring debts and impoverishing people. They drain wealth to fuel wars. Everyone needs to see what no debts a small military and global commerce can accomplish. America would make Europe dependent. Paine's British merchants sided with independence. The real ones did not. To Paine, trade benefits everyone. Monarchy benefits only the king. Paine supported a hydra-like class structure rather than a snake-like one. Franklin, Paine, and Oliver Goldsmith divided humanity into continent-based races. If incest invalidated British monarchy, then Americans had to be a 5th race.
Linnaeus, organized all of plant and animal life and divided Homo sapiens, the word he coined for humans, into 4 varieties. The European type, he said, was sanguine, brawny, acute, and inventive. The American Indian he deemed choleric and obstinate, yet free. The Asian was melancholic and greedy, and the African was crafty, indolent, and negligent. This grand and ethnocentric taxonomy served Paine's purpose in justifying the American Revolution.
To Paine, America could excise monarchy's dead weight. Paine wisely avoided class slavery and indenture. Paine's office was across the street from a slave market. North America was bigger than England, which naturally must orbit North America. Canada would join and Mexico was forgotten. To Paine, independence cures idleness while magically solving intercolony arguments. The unchristian Paine propagandized Christian imagery. America and Britain were competing empires. Ignoring waste people, slaves, and indentured allowed even them to embrace Paine's ideas. So at this point, our house has an eat-in kitchen and a parlor. There are people living in it, but they've nowhere to sleep and nothing to stop the rain, snow, and cold. Maybe what we really need is a tenant with some southern sensibilities about them. Let's discuss Jefferson. No circumstance of superior beauty is thought worthy of attention in the propagation of our horses, dogs, and other animals. Why not in that of man? Someone is going to want a roof on this house, so maybe it's about time we started that process. I'm going to add a bedroom first, like how Thomas Jefferson set 2 precedents when he doubled the size of the nation. Pennsylvania gave us Franklin's forced vagrancy. In Virginia, you get Jeffersonian logic. Buy Louisiana and magically people become self-sufficient. Owning 13,000 acres and 180 slaves puts Jefferson in the top 10% of white Virginia dudes, a yeoman only in his own mind. Tommy applied science to agriculture. He made American farming more British. British farmers were ahead of us, but you have to adapt their methods. Jefferson wanted to educate smaller and less successful farmers, and the gentry was like, "We don't need no education." Educated in classics, trained in law, multilingual, and surrounded by European trappings, Jefferson saw human behavior as a continuum of flux fitting the environment. Classes rise from land and labor relations. Producers, husbandmen, and landowners are tied to the soil. Tenants and slaves need not apply. Jefferson considered himself a cultivator. Farmers take from the land. Cultivators give to it. Jefferson's classes were naturally occurring human strata. Let me explain. As the Revolution approached, Jefferson and Washington thought foot soldiers synonymous with low class. Virginia poor were like, "We think we would not like to die for land we do not own." Virginia was like, "Free your slaves for fighting, man." And Virginia poor were like, "How the f*** are we supposed to feed and clothe them?" In revolutionary Virginia, only males over 21 with 25 acres can vote. Tommy wanted to give every man 50 acres, and the assembly was like, no. To Jefferson, splitting holdings among progeny and allowing open land sales made sense, and every freeborn child deserved 75 acres. This backfired. The land was sold to wealthy planters. Western squatters had first right of purchase, so the poor willingly moved west, where they are still tenants. Jefferson wanted public school. Children attend primary school, and capable males continue into grammar school at public expense. It was a means of identifying geniuses to enlarge the elite. Poor?
His handful of lucky scholars would be raked from the rubbish, leaving the majority to wallow in ignorance and poverty. Rubbish was his alliterative variation on the ever-present theme of waste people. He wasn't anticipating Teddy Roosevelt's Bunyanesque allusion to muck-raking journalists, but rather was invoking the older Elizabethan meaning of raking the muck of a bad crop. The rubbish designation showed contempt for the poor, a sad reminder that very few were capable of escaping the refuse heap.
That bill failed, but the workhouse bill passed. Poor, no longer marked with a badge. Yes, really. Their children were sold as apprentices. This isn't class reform, it's just a little less distance between the rich and the poor. Small changes accumulate over generations and evolve into a middle class. Jefferson got mad at George Louis Leclerc and wrote Notes on the State of Virginia, part travelogue, part legal brief, all propaganda. Sure, Leclerc deserved correction, but Jefferson talked about living woolly mammoths. The environment that produced Franklin and Washington was obviously not corrupt as far as Jefferson was concerned. Natural history practitioners Jefferson and Leclerc agreed that races and classes were environmental. Jefferson's natives were natural warriors and Europeans natural farmers. Race rested on incorrect assumptions, but let's pretend we don't know that since Jefferson didn't. Cultivation of land, animals, and people civilizes man. Democracy requires the land, making the man wild. Old world luxuries did not belong here because I guess German cuckoo clocks just grow in the Black Forest. Jefferson's society required children with manners and order, like a Northwest territory of square lots and square counties and states. I'm on the spectrum and I'm like, yo, Tom, unclench. 10 square free states in 1800. To Jefferson, manufacturing was a canker on the body politic. Cultivation and husbandry were God's work. Small farmers were local suppliers, while gentlemen farmers fed industry. A free labor Northwest territory would encourage future greatness. Industriousness is learned. Jefferson envisioned industrious German plots next to ex-slave plots. German farmers raised a standard for poor white farmers. Jefferson missed the injustice. State debts and tax gouging create a war depression. Speculators cheat veterans and transfer wealth to the nouveau riche. The Society of Cincinnati's titles, medals, and hereditary rights are the reason titles are banned in the Northwest Territory. Trouble boiled at the bottom. Mutinies and riots treated as inconsequential. In 1784, Jefferson proclaimed the U.S. beggar extinct. In 1785, Virginia rounded up those extinct beggars. Enter Daniel Shays. In 1786, mounting debts pushed Captain Daniel Shays to rebel. Courts selling repossessed land were closed. To Jefferson, it refreshes society's principles and should happen every 13 years. Hey, Tommy, class anger fuels rebellion. His rebels were sedimentary debris loosed on humanity. Jefferson claimed the poorest laborers stood on equal ground with the wealthiest in America, in distinctions of birth and badges. Alien here as living in, yes, in the moon. Poor tradesmen couldn't run for office, the public went uneducated, and courts favored the rich. That is Jefferson's meritocracy. Washington's aristocratic Republican court meet and greets for the elite were embraced. Jefferson even sent Napoleon Bonaparte a letter endorsing Napoleon's brother's Philly, calling the president Majesty is where we draw the line. After inauguration, Jefferson rode his horse to the White House, where he greeted dignitaries in an old vest and slippers, while sheep grazed on the lawn. A yeoman who wrote his thoughts down. The circumstance of superior beauty is thought worthy of attention in the propagation of our horses, dogs, and other animals. Why not in that of men? Jefferson believed that more than 1/8 racial blood conferred race.
It is understood in natural history that a fourth cross of one race of animals gives an issue of equivalent, for all sensible purposes, to the original bloods. This was the same formula Jefferson used in breeding an original stock of merino sheep. William Byrd had earlier talked about blanching Native Americans through intermarriage with Europeans. As Buffon put it, breeding back to the original stock meant reconstituting blacks as white people.
Okay, you have 2 parents, that's 2 crosses, and you are half of each of them. 4 grandparents, and are 3 crosses, at 25% of each of them. 8 grandparents are a 4th cross, and you are 12.5% of each one. So 1 purple great-grandparent makes you white. 2, and you're purple. Yes, I know it's dumb, but if you understand that, then you know what it is. In 1789, William Short spoke of U.S. blacks becoming lighter through intermarriage and climate. He also imagined Swedish Africans turning white, which has not happened yet. Jefferson thought he could prove Short wrong. Jefferson fathered children with his dead wife's half-white half-sister, Sally Hemings. Tom and Sally's kids were the 4th cross. Beverly and Harriet ran away and lived as free whites. Tom freed his children, Madison and Eston, in his will. Yes, his children, in his will. Jefferson treated slaves as chattel. Children were increase. Breeding female slaves were worth more than males. Jefferson stated, "I consider the labor of a breeding woman as no object, and a child raised every 2 years is of more profit than the best crop." Adams quoted Theognis, "When we want to purchase animals, we inquire for the well-born. A good man does not care to marry a shrew unless they give him a great deal of money." To Jefferson, Adams' men were vainly ambitious beasts. Take 100 random men and 25 will run the show. Proving classes are natural. Well-born and landed were synonymous. Jefferson was a Randolph and Adams married a Quincy. Jefferson's Theognis argued against marrying for money. Humans are sexually driven, which ensures propagation. Lust, love, and women's ostrom fueled men's fires. Wise men do not marry for money. Wisely choosing politicians is no harder than wisely choosing a wife. This creates aristocracy because math. It hurt Jefferson's neck to look down the class ladder and see the meaner sorts. By 1815, Jefferson thought the Virginia class system needed new blood, so he pitted yeomen against overseers in a proto-white fragility. Jefferson ignored the slaves the overseers oversaw and waste people, but that didn't make them disappear. Okay, so we've got land, people, 3 rooms, and a roof over 2 of them. The kitchen is still open air, and the kids are still sleeping in the parents' bedroom.
Let's talk about sex, baby.
Going to have to fix that. Let's talk about Andrew Jackson. It will place a dense and civilized population in large tracts of country now occupied by a few savage hunters. Our house is almost finished. We need a sleeping loft and outside accoutrements. Right now, it looks like a frontier cabin. Speaking of the frontier, it is between the Appalachians and the Mississippi and Ohio rivers. The government is incapable of controlling migration. White settlers on native lands create danger. Does any of that sound familiar? It should. Let me explain. Western territories were U.S. colonies. Settlers were treated accordingly. 11 years earlier, the Articles of Confederation barred paupers, vagabonds, and fugitives, or the landless poor, from citizenship. Western settlers were just updated English vagrants. Jefferson and Franklin's lands are settled. We're moving into Ohio, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, and Wisconsin, or the Northwest Territory. With vile vagabonds and squatters, settlers were
King of the wild frontier.
Or
I was a highwayman.
And there are 3 classes: elite, their servants, and villainous human waste.
Interlopers and trespassers, unpoliced squatters and crackers, grew crops, cut timber, hunted and fished on land they did not own. They lived in temporary huts beyond the reach of the civilizing forces of law and society, and often in proximity to Native Americans.
Squatters and crackers flooded in, proving that
Freedom is just another word for nothing left to lose.
Hacklet saw the New World as empty, legally available for the taking, which Elizabeth and James I did. Squatters and crackers, whom I will call squackers, hold that paradigm. Squackers tamed this land. It was theirs. The U.S. government disagreed. Squattering became a capital offense. Settlers flooded down the Susquehanna, the Ohio, and overland into Georgia. The military calls them vermin and scum of nature, licentious thieves, Semi-criminal men, wanton women, and entire families masquerading as traitors follow troops. Generals employ them to attack savages. Words have important meanings. Squatters are not standing, as in legal standing. The Folkgeist pictured lawless rascals worse than natives. Virginia's governor sold land outside his borders. That was North Carolina. Their descendants are on the new frontier. Reverend Charles Woodmason called Virginia crackers loud, obnoxious, and rude. Dr. Benjamin Ruth said Pennsylvania crackers were slothful and violent. Enter Franklin, a self-made man, from runaway apprentice to international celebrity, all on his own! Except, like Hamilton, this is a myth. That myth loomed large in the Northwest Territory, and Kentucky, Tennessee, Missouri, and Arkansas Territory, or the Upper South, as well as East and West Florida, where a small, powerful gentry ruled landowners who lorded over servants and slaves. Then Rhodes created rich merchants in Lexington, Kentucky, of all places, attracting artisans of Franklin's meaner sort. New settlers and existing squatters rebel against physics and attempt to occupy the same place at the same time. President Jefferson said these intruders existed on the margins of the marketplace economy, which is capitalism. In 1786, mounting debts pushed Captain Daniel Chase to rebel. In 1819, financial panic hit the frontier hard, ripening the region for treason and spoil. By 1850, over one-third of Southwesterners were landless tenants and squatters. The Northwest federal grants favored the wealthy. Political cartoons and speeches depicted squackers as crude and boastful, distrustful of civilization, and outrageous storytellers who welcomed strangers. Apparently, squackers were bipolar. Enter Andrew Jackson, a populist politician celebrating the squacker as the common man. A tall, raw-boned backwoodsman with a bullet next to his heart. Resentments drove revenge campaigns. He put himself above the law. Jackson campaigned as Old Hickory, rigid with an iron will. He invented the cult of personality. The land-hungry paragon of unstatesmanlike conduct garnered praise from his base. President Jackson ignored the Supreme Court and aggressively removed Cherokees with the Indian Removal Act. Jackson actively shifted the land paradigm back. Florida to Maine and west to the Mississippi and Ohio rivers, squackers bear colorful colloquialisms like Mississippi skimmers, Kentucky corncrackers, and Indiana hoosiers. The gentry were slaves, but ridiculed squacker sexual behavior for producing dirty yellow urchins. But back to Jackson, who endlessly sent constituents from the Democratic Party to the Whig Party. Detractors called him King Andrew I. Jackson was a slaveholding planter with a common man's backstory invented for his campaign biography. He became a national hero in the Battle of New Orleans. After this, he raised an army and waged a squatters' war with Spanish Florida. He followed our old buddy TJ's example, making him the president who doubled the size of the U.S. and set the precedent on ignoring the founding documents he wrote, which summarizes Jackson's 1824 and 28 campaigns. He used the military to remove squatters and did that whole Indian Removal Act thing. Jackson's supporters defended him with supposedly humorous exaggeration. Of course, a self-taught man of action lacked polish. Jackson won in 1828. May the hickory ramrods ram down the powder of equality into our national guns and wad it well with the voices of the people to blow clay in the mud, toasted one Jacksonian. In 1790, Jackson married the married Rachel Robards in Spanish Natchez. To detractors, this was bigamy. To supporters, it just needs context.
All sorts of vicious names were used in demeaning Rachel Jackson. She was called an American Jezebel, weak and vulgar, and a dirty black wench, all of which pointed to her questionable backwoods upbringing. It was pro-Adams editor James G. Dana of Kentucky who luridly painted her as a whore. She could no more pass in polite company, he said with racist outrage, than a gentleman's black mistress, even if the black wench wore a white mask. Her stain of impurity would never be tolerated among Washington's better sort.
Paupers attacked Rachel's speech, musical tastes, and race, all to tear down Jackson. Jackson, Old Hickory, the Knight of New Orleans, introduced Bragg to politics. You've heard of Stockholm Syndrome, right? It's a psychological condition where the oppressed identify with their oppressors. Political humor made fun of Walnut Cracker, the Duke of Wildcat Cove. But for Jackson, bragging, dueling, and oaths were class pedigree. Jackson rode populism into the White House. He didn't squat one soft turd about squatters' rights. But his platform was the squatters' right to settle, improve, and then purchase land. He portrayed squatters as the hard-working, cabin-building, land-clearing settlers. Jackson's log cabin bill allowed squatters to buy land cheaply. Jackson started these populist politics in 1824. They apexed in 1840. The Cracker was the colloquial common Democrat. Log cabins, nicknames, and coonskin caps were symbols of real Americans, which did not help a dandy from New York. The fictional Sugar, or Shug, dressed in rags, toting brown-sugared whiskey to elections, he had lost his wife and farm before becoming a non-voting stumper. Shug dispensed the common man's common sense. Tamed squatters did not equate to political equality. Land requirements for voting remained in places until 1857. Local suffrage laws often disenfranchised paupers and the poor. Jackson helped draft suffrage limitations in 1796 and never attempted expansions. Jackson was elected for embracing the rude instinct of masculine liberty. The squatter was simultaneously a transient, bragging, boasting, brawling demigod of beggars, and socially below the settler. The Cracker symbolized class division. Shug was not the elected official's equal, could not be president, and could not even meet the president. Democratic boasting maintained class structure. Boasting was a race bribe because white people have always been idiots. See Columbus. Now, politicians must woo squatters. A stumping Arkansas politician was ignored until he dismounted, played the fiddle, and met the squatter as an equal. The stumper returns to his mansion with the squatter's vote, and the squatter gets nothing. And with that, our house is built and populated. And it looks really nice from the outside, which is how framing works. Put up walls and the framing disappears. Once the framing is thoroughly hidden, it only takes a little whitewashing to make it beautiful. We codified class stasis into the slave code, starting with Virginia. White people gladly accepted someone below them as a race bribe without ever realizing that stasis did not stop with slave and free, which turned descendants into Come back next time to see what the next part of U.S. history builds. I'm sure it will be completely new and have nothing to do with anything that happened in this episode. Hey, if you made it this far, click like, dude. As I stated in the introduction, this video only covers the first part of Eisenberg's book. There will be 2 more videos that cover parts 2 and 3. Each will be a standalone video while also part of a larger series telling a complete story. Yes, here's the finished Lego house I've been building! However, before we get to part 2 of this, our 4th of July special needs to be created and will most likely be released first. It complements this video nicely as it covers Gerald Horne's The Counter-Revolution of 1776 and is targeted as a feature-length video. It will have to be because it looks at the real role the black people played in the U.S. Revolution. When this story resumes, we'll be picking up with pre-Civil War intersectionality and the creation of the term poor white trash, and move all the way through our old pals Elvis and LBJ with the cult of the country boy. You don't have to wait for that though, just jump down into the description and pick yourself up a copy of the book. If you're a white dude, leave a comment and let me know what you think. Have you been mad at the wrong people for your entire life? I mean, I know I was for a very long time, but if I can learn a new way, so can you. If you're feeling confused after watching this video, that's a good thing. It's called cognitive dissonance. Let it settle in for a little bit. When you realize that your entire identity is a lie, it's a bad afternoon. I know because I've been there. But relax, I'm becoming the man I always thought I was, and that's pretty cool. You can do this too. The first step is learning the actual historical reasons you feel the way you do. Because like anthrax taught us in 1990, you emulate what you hate and you don't even know why you feel this way. Racism, classism, and sexism are an industrial political combat handed down from generation to generation to keep us fighting. It's time to stop hating things just because mommy and daddy did. Go ahead and tell your thoughts in a comment. Like the video and share it with a friend to let YouTube know you enjoyed it. That will really help me out. And I'll see you next time there is an impossible knot to untie, baby. Poor tradesmen couldn't run for office. The public went uneducated. Courts favored the rich. And poor tradesmen couldn't run for office. The public went uneducated. Courts favored the rich. This is Jefferson's mediocrity.